The Lost Love. Many years have passed, and I am no longer young. My hair is white, and my body feels tired. But I can still see her in my mind. Her name was Mary. She was the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen. I was only 18 when I met her, and she was 16. I loved her with all my heart. I remember the first time I saw her. It was a sunny day in the village. She was sitting by the river reading a book. Her hair was long and brown, and her eyes shined like stars. I walked over to her and said hello. She smiled at me, and my heart beat faster. We became friends. We would talk every day after school. I told her about my dreams and my hopes. She listened to me, and I listened to her. She told me about her family and her life. We shared everything, but I was too shy to tell her how I felt. One day I finally told her that I loved her. I took a deep breath and said, "Mary, I love you." She looked at me for a moment. Then she shook her head. "I don't love you like that," she said. "You are my friend, but that's all." My heart broke. I felt like the world had fallen apart. But I didn't show her how much it hurt. I just smiled and said, "It's okay, we can still be friends." But after that day, things were never the same. I could not stop thinking about her. I saw her every day, but it felt like she was far away. I never forgot her, even though she never loved me back. Years passed, and I grew older. I never married. I couldn't. No one could ever take Mary's place. She was the one I loved, and she always would be. Sometimes, when I am alone, I think of her. I wonder where she is now. Does she remember me? Does she ever think of me? I don't know. But I will always love her, and she will always be in my heart. Years passed, and I moved to the city. I found a job, and I lived alone. I thought maybe it would help me forget Mary, but it didn't. Every day I thought of her. I missed the way she smiled. I missed her voice. I missed her laugh. I would walk through the streets and see young couples holding hands. They looked so happy together. It made me feel sad. I thought, why could I not be with her? Why couldn't she love me? One evening, many years later, I went back to the village. It had changed a lot. New houses were built, and the old places were gone. But I went to the river where I had first seen Mary. I sat there, looking at the water. I remembered the first time we talked. I remembered how happy we were. Suddenly, I heard a voice. "Are you all right?" I turned around and saw a woman standing there. She was older now, but I knew it was her. It was Mary. I was shocked. I stood up quickly and said, "Mary, is that really you?" She smiled at me. "Yes, it is. I didn't know you would come back here." We sat down by the river and talked. She told me about her life. She had married someone else, and she had children. She was happy, but there was something in her eyes that told me she had some sadness too. I asked her, "Do you ever think of me?" She looked down at the ground for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, sometimes. I wonder what would have happened if I had loved you back." My heart felt heavy. I wanted to tell her that I never stopped loving her, but I didn't. I just said, "It's okay, Mary. I just wanted to see you again." She smiled and said, "I'm glad you came. It's good to see you." As I walked away that day, I felt the same sadness I had felt so many years ago. I knew I would never forget her. She was always in my heart, and now, after all these years, I had finally seen her again. But it was too late. I returned to the city and life went on. But I always remember her. Mary, the girl I loved, will never be forgotten. She will always be the one who got away. Time passed, and I grew older. I worked hard every day. But no matter how busy I was, Mary never left my mind. I still thought about her often. I still remembered her smile, the way she would laugh when we were young. It was a memory that never faded. I never married. I never wanted to. I couldn't imagine loving anyone else. Some people would say you should move on, find someone new, but they didn't understand. They didn't know what it was like to love someone so much, someone who could never love you back. One day I met a woman at work. Her name was Sarah. She was kind and beautiful, and she liked me. We started talking, and she smiled at me. I could see that she cared about me. I thought maybe I should give it a try. Maybe I can love her. But every time I looked at her, I saw Mary's face. I couldn't stop thinking about Mary. Sarah could tell something was wrong. She asked me, "Why do you look so sad? Is there something you're not telling me?" I couldn't lie to her. I said, "I loved someone a long time ago, but she never loved me back, and I can't forget her." Sarah looked at me with understanding. It's hard to forget someone you loved so much. But maybe it's time to let go. I tried to let go of Mary, but it was too hard. My heart was still with her. I could never forget her. One night, I went to bed and I thought about everything that had happened. I thought about Mary, about the time we spent together. I thought about how she had never loved me. And I realized something. I could never move on. Mary would always be a part of me. Even though she was not with me, she had shaped my life. She had taught me what it meant to love. But she had also taught me that sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes, no matter how much you care about someone, they may never feel the same way. And so I lived my life, carrying her memory in my heart. I never stopped loving her, and I never will. She was my lost love, the one that got away. Years passed, and my life continued. I grew older, and the world around me changed. I still lived in the same small town. Everything felt the same, but it also felt different. I would see young people walking down the street, laughing and smiling, full of hope for the future. I would see couples holding hands, and it would make my heart ache. I still thought about Mary every day. Every morning when I woke up, I would remember her smile. Every night, before I fell asleep, I would think about the times we shared. I often wondered what she was doing, where she was. Was she happy? Did she ever think about me? One day I decided to visit the old park where we used to meet. It had been many years, but I still remembered every corner of it. I walked through the path where we had sat together, where we had laughed and talked for hours. I sat on the same bench we used to sit on. It was quiet, just like it had always been. I closed my eyes and imagined her there beside me. I imagined that she was still young and beautiful. I imagined that she had never left. But when I opened my eyes, she was gone. The park was empty and the world was still. I sat there for a long time, thinking. I realized that I had been holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. I had been holding on to a memory of a love that could never be, and I wondered if it was time to let go. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't forget her. She had been my first love, and for a long time I thought she would be my last. But life doesn't always work out the way we plan. Sometimes love doesn't work out. Sometimes the person you love will never love you back. And yet, Mary's memory stayed with me. She was the love of my life, even if we could never be together. I knew that I would carry her in my heart forever. As I walked away from the park that day, I realized something. It was okay to remember her. It was okay to still love her. I didn't need to forget her to move on. I just needed to accept that sometimes love is not enough. And sometimes you have to learn to live with the sadness, to carry it with you, and to keep moving forward. Mary would always be my lost love, and I would never stop missing her. As the years continued to pass, I grew older. My hair turned grey, and my steps became slower. The world around me changed even more. People moved in and out of town. New families came, and old faces disappeared. Yet, no matter how much time went by, Mary's memory never left me. One cold winter evening, I sat by the fire, watching the flames dance in the hearth. The warmth of the fire was a small comfort on a night so cold. The house was quiet, and I thought about the years that had passed. I thought about the times when I was young, when everything seemed possible, and Mary was there, laughing beside me. I had seen her only once since we were young. It was a few years ago. She was walking down the street, her hair grey like mine. I had stopped and stared at her, but she didn't see me. She was walking with her family, a man and children. I had watched them walk away, feeling a pain in my chest. I wanted to call out to her, to say something, but I couldn't. I wasn't sure if she even remembered me. But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I knew that Mary had lived her life, and I had lived mine. She had found a family, children, and love. She had moved on, and I hadn't. It was a bitter truth, but it was the truth. I wondered if she ever thought about me, if she ever wondered what had happened to the boy who had loved her so deeply. But even if she didn't, I understood. Life goes on. People change, hearts heal, and time moves forward, whether we are ready for it or not. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snow falling softly outside. The night was still, peaceful, and I felt the weight of all the years in my heart. I had loved once, and that love had shaped my life in ways I could never explain. But I also knew that life was more than love. It was about living, learning, and growing. It was about finding joy in the small moments, even when the past was heavy. It was about accepting the pain and moving forward with hope, even if that hope was a little faded. I didn't regret loving Mary. I didn't regret the time we spent together. I didn't regret the heartache that followed. All of it had made me who I was. And though I would never forget her, I knew it was time to let her go. As I sat down again by the fire, I closed my eyes. For the first time in many years, I felt at peace. Mary would always be in my heart, but I knew I could live without her. I had to. Life had moved on, and so would I. The years passed, and my life slowly found a rhythm. The loneliness was still there, but it was quieter now. I had my routine. I would wake up early every morning, tend to the garden, and sit on the porch with a cup of tea in the afternoon. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. One evening, as the sun was setting, I found myself sitting outside, watching the sky turn pink and orange. It reminded me of the days when I was young, when Mary and I would watch the sunsets together. We would sit by the river, talking about our dreams and the future. I had believed then that we would always be together. But life doesn't always work out the way we plan. As I sat there, I felt a presence beside me. I turned my head, and there she was. Not Mary, but a little girl, no older than I was when I first met her. She was standing by the fence, smiling shyly at me. "Hello," she said softly. I smiled back, surprised. "Hello," I replied, my voice calm, but my heart began to race. It was strange, but something about her felt familiar, like a dream I couldn't quite remember. "My name is Lily," the little girl said. "My parents live next door. They told me you were a kind man. Can I talk to you for a while?" I nodded and motioned for her to come closer. She sat down beside me, and we talked for a long time. She told me about her family, her school, and her dreams. I listened carefully, smiling at her innocence and warmth. In many ways, she reminded me of the young Mary. As the conversation went on, I realized something important. The ache in my heart, the pain from the past, had lessened over the years. I had spent so much time holding on to a memory, to a love that could never be. But now, as I listened to Lily's laughter and her stories, I realized that life was still full of surprises. There was still love to be found, even if it wasn't the same love I had once known. When the sun finally disappeared behind the hills, Lily stood up to leave. "I have to go," she said, smiling at me. "Thank you for talking to me." I watched her walk away, her small figure disappearing into the evening light. I felt a warmth in my heart, something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the same as the love I had for Mary, but it was something new, something hopeful. Maybe life wasn't as empty as I had thought. Maybe there was still room for new beginnings, even in the autumn of my years. As I stood up and turned back toward the house, I realized that I had finally let go of the past. Mary's memory would always be with me, but I no longer felt bound to it. I had learned to live with the pain, and in time I had learned to live without it. And so I would continue my life, with its quiet moments and small joys, knowing that the future was still ahead of me, waiting for whatever came next.